Thank you for joining us. This is the Retirement Revolution with financial advisor Rob Guy. He's the founder of Tax and Investments. I am your host, Spike Spangle. Don't go anywhere. Today is a big program. What is it that you wanted to discuss today, Rob?
Well, Spike, I'm actually very excited to talk about taxes today. The name of my firm, Tax and Investment Advisors, the reason I do that is because I feel like taxes is one of the areas that is not paid enough attention to when people are doing their planning. You know, when you think about retirement planning, all of us were told from way back that we should start putting money in our tax-deferred accounts, IRAs, 401ks, stuff as much as you can in those tax-deferred accounts, because why? Well, you're going to be in a lower tax bracket later in retirement. But as it turns out, that's not necessarily the case for a lot of people.
And I want to ask you a little bit of the why on that. If we go back to 1980s, the early 1980s, tax rates and brackets were much higher than they are right now, right?
They were, yeah. You know, we have some of the lowest tax brackets right now that we've had in many, many years. And so there are some really significant planning opportunities that we can take advantage of. And, you know, that was great that we all got that money saved up in those retirement plans. But now the problem is none of that money has ever been taxed. So you've been building all these assets, maybe putting money in there for 20, 30, 40 years, deferring taxes, not eliminating taxes. So now you have this big pile of money in your IRA and 401k. That's wonderful, but there's a big IOU to the IRS on that. Not all that money is yours. And so we want to talk about ways to maybe mitigate or reduce some of those risks that you're ultimately going to have to pay when you start withdrawing those funds.
I don't think there's a better city to talk about this than right here in Boston. Come on, the Boston Tea Party was all about the taxation.
That's right.
And I think still all across America, taxation, overly taxed, it's something that is a fundamental, irritation of Americans. We want to, we'll pay our fair share. Right. We want to have help with our roads and our schools, but we don't have to pay more than we want to. Now, I think where part of the education really needs to be worked on is that, sure, you get to take that off of your taxes, whatever you're saving in those tax-deferred accounts during your working years.
Right.
But should that still be the goal right now if we're in our 50s or 60s with these lower tax rates?
Right. Well, it really not necessarily for everybody. So everybody's situation is a little bit different. But the typical type of person that I'm talking to and that I'm dealing with, they're hardworking New England families. They started saving when they were young. They had discipline. They weren't spending their money on extra boats and extra cars and fancy vacations. They were putting their money away. And now all of a sudden they've ended up with a lot more money in their retirement accounts than they ever imagined. And one of the things that people think is, oh, well, when I get into retirement, I won't have income from work, so I'm not going to have as many taxes to pay. But the reality is, it's actually more complicated than that. You have taxes on Social Security, you have taxes on your investment income, you have taxes on your required minimum distributions. That point in time at which the government says, you've deferred tax on this money long enough, time to pay up.
And then you add in Social Security. Yeah. And I know there's been some recent announcements, and there's a couple of extra deductions for those over the age of 65.
Right.
We'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. But right now, Social Security is still not completely tax-free. So when you start that, along with taking that money out from those tax-deferred accounts and your investment accounts, you're right. It's starting to sound like your tax burden is close to the same thing as during your working years.
Right.
Because you've got, every day is Saturday, so you've got to you got to spend from somewhere on that. Yeah. So one of the things, as we're going to talk about throughout today's show, though, are solutions to this. You have put together a free tool. It's called the BostonTaxTest.com.
Right.
Would you like to explain a little bit about how this works?
Sure. The BostonTaxTest.com is a way for you to try to estimate what your tax liability is going to be on your portfolio. What it allows you to do is put in the value of all your tax-deferred accounts, maybe of IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, whatever it might be, add up the value of all those accounts. And then we can plug in the formula, which will determine how much you're going to have to take out of those accounts when you reach that required minimum distribution age.
Now, I'll tell you, Rob, I've gone on some of these kinds of free tools online. One of them was an insurance one, and I filled out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pages to try to get a quote on something, and eventually it said, oh, then we'll send you an email. I never got the answer.
Right.
This is not how that tool works, folks. When you go to it, bostontaxtest.com, you can type that into your browser, or you can scan this QR code if you want to. Put up your phone to the camera function and click on it. It'll take you right there. You'll put in your email address, your name, and your sort of estimate of what you have saved in those tax-deferred accounts, and then what your tax rate is. You might be able to remember from last year, the last couple of years. You'll put that in, and you will get that report directly. And it's going to show you a snapshot right now of how much you owe in taxes, because, as you had just said a few minutes ago, what you have saved in those tax-deferred accounts, that's not all your money.
Right.
You got a partner in there. It's Uncle Sam. So what do we do with this information then once we do the tax test?
Okay. Once you have an idea of what your current tax liability would be, and an important point to make here is that's just a snapshot of today. If you continue to allow those accounts to defer year after year after year, that burden's only going to get worse. So really important to get going on this stuff as soon as possible, because the sooner you start taking action to mitigate those taxes in the future, the better off you're going to be. What we can do is, by looking at your specific situation, finding out what your potential tax liability will be based on your other income sources, pension, Social Security, other investment accounts. We can strategize and put together a specific recommendation for you that you can utilize to eventually minimize those taxes when those taxes become due.
Rob, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask, I know that you're a financial advisor. I know that you help folks with income strategies, obviously talking about taxes, estate planning, healthcare. How does the tax process work for you and clients? I don't think you're sitting there filing everybody's tax returns April 15th, but this seems to be a big issue for you. How do you help folks?
Well, it really is. So we're not tax preparers. So a tax preparer is somebody who looks at history, and then they put the numbers on the right line, and then they file that for you. And that's what tax preparation is, and that's a big need. That's actually not what we're doing. We're doing tax planning. We're saying, what is your lifetime tax bill going to be if you don't take any action? And then what could it potentially be if you start implementing some of the strategies that we're recommending? It's not uncommon for us to be able to show people how to save tens and sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars of lifetime taxes on their required minimum distributions.
So one of the things that you can do right now watching the program is you can go to bostontaxtest.com. I'm telling you, it's like 5 or 6, maybe 7 inputs total. It's a couple of moments, and then you will get that report. But just as financial advisor Rob here was saying, it's only a snapshot of right now. The longer you leave that in there, if you leave that in there 5, 10, 20 years, that tax burden is going to continue to grow. So get that snapshot right now. And then if you want to, call the phone number, set up your appointment. Rob Guy is right here in the greater Boston area helping you be and stay retired. Let's help you mitigate your own tax strategy in retirement. Call 855-255-1128. We'll be right back with more Retirement Revolution. The Boston Tea Party. Let's get Uncle Sam out of our accounts. We'll be right back after this.
Well, I found myself in the finance industry all the way back in 1979. It was actually a conversation at the dinner table that I was having with my family. You know, one of those dinners that everybody remembers, right? Mom and dad are there, brothers and sisters are there, everybody's having fun. We're all talking about our day. And then my mom asked my dad, how was your day today, Matt? My dad said, my day was wonderful. And he went on to tell my mom about his day. And see, my father was actually one of the first financial advisors back in the day when financial planning just first started getting going. He was telling the story at dinner that night that he had helped a gentleman with his financial planning, and that gentleman was so thankful, literally had tears in his eyes. This very hard-working guy, and my dad was able to show him the techniques and the strategies to allow him to have a confident and comfortable retirement. My dad's telling this story at the dinner table, and he actually starts tearing up telling the story, thinking about the gentleman that was tearing up, and then my mom starts tearing up, right? And I'm thinking, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this was very rewarding. My dad said, if you want to be happy in life, you can
do well by doing good. That really resonated with me, and I decided right then and there I was going to become a financial advisor. I went to school, got a degree in finance, and immediately started in the industry right out of college at 24 years old.
Welcome back to the Retirement Revolution with financial advisor Rob Guy. He's right here in Boston. He's the founder of Tax and Investment Advisors. I am Spike Spangle. Today we're trying to detaxify some of your retirement accounts.
Right.
If you can. But again, how exactly did we get here? I understand there's $8 to $9 trillion in tax deferred United States, Americans' savings accounts.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, because we were all told, and it was thought to be the right thing to do, to put all that money into those tax-deferred accounts, because we got a tax deduction on the money going in. And we figured, all right, I'm earning income, I'd like to have a tax deduction. So that seemed like a pretty good idea at the time. But if you think about it, when you got a deduction on that tax, the amount you put in, that was really a deduction on the seed, if you will. Now you're going to pay taxes on the harvest. So if you ended up in your lifetime putting $250,000 into your tax-deferred accounts, and now it's worth $1 million, you're going to pay tax on all $1 million. And really, what people find shocking is how much money they're going to actually have to pay on those taxes, on those distributions. So there's a formula that comes into play when you hit a certain age. It's either 73 if you were born in the 50s or 75 if you were born in 60 or after. And the government says you've been deferring those taxes long enough, now it's time to pay up. So what they do is they take the balance of your IRAs and 401ks on the year prior to when it's due. So let's say I was turning 73 this year. They take my 12/31 value of all my tax-deferred accounts as of 12/31 last year, and then they would divide that by a formula, factor. Really comes out to about, say, 4% of the amount you've saved. Well, you start having people with $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in their account, and it starts at 4% and goes up from there. Well, for some people, that's $100,000, $80,000, $150,000 in distributions. Well, if they have Social Security, maybe a pension, they have other savings. A lot of these people, like I said, hardworking New England families, they've paid off their mortgage, they're not blowing money, they have 2 Social Security checks, they could probably live on that, or maybe a little bit more. Then all of a sudden they have an additional $100,000, $110,000, $150,000 distribution due out of their tax-deferred account. That starts pushing them up into much higher tax brackets. And it also brings in kind of a snowball effect, if you will. Now you're paying higher taxes on Social Security. You're paying higher taxes potentially on capital gains. You're paying higher taxes on your Medicare premiums. It can have, a ripple effect where you don't realize that just that little $1 extra of income, well, if it's bringing some of that Social Security, and up to 85% of your Social Security can be taxed, right?
Yeah.
So some people, every additional dollar coming out of their IRA is creating an additional $1.85 in taxes, because now you're bringing in the Social Security as well. So it's kind of a ticking tax time bomb, if you will, and we want to try to diffuse that. I know we're going to talk about some strategies to do that. An analogy I use sometimes is, these tax-deferred retirement accounts, it's kind of like a balloon. It started really small, right? But it's been going and growing and growing, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know what happens? You turn 73 and boom, the thing blows up in your face, right? Because you weren't paying attention to that. You thought you needed the tax deduction when you went in, and that's right, maybe you did, and we thought maybe we'd be in lower taxes later on. But as it turns out, because the stock market has done so well, people have been so diligent saving, they have these balances in their IRAs they never thought they were going to have. And unfortunately, that's great, but it also means much higher taxes in retirement.
And, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And that time bomb is the RMD, the required minimum distribution.
Right.
So that's the promise, that's the carrot and the stick. And this stick is getting bigger and bigger, and it's going to hit us all in the face. It's required. You have to start taking that money out.
That's right.
In fact, the penalty used to be much higher. It used to be 50% penalty on what you were supposed to take out. Sometimes people did it on accident and they didn't realize, but there's no getting around this. There's a 25% tax penalty on what you're supposed to take out if you don't do it. So you have to do it. Okay. So let's just say 65.
Yep.
What can I start doing about that? What can I do? I know we've got the BostonTaxTest.com.
Right.
Is 65 a reasonable age to think about something like a Roth conversion?
Absolutely. You know, the sooner the better. If you start planning for future taxes, always the sooner the better. What happens is, let's say you're 65 years old and your required distribution doesn't start till 73. Well, that's several years now that we have where we can start moving money from your forever taxed accounts to those never taxed accounts. What's a never taxed account? It's called a Roth IRA. Now, I'm not talking about a contribution to a Roth IRA, which could be limited to $8,000. I'm talking about what's called a Roth conversion. You can convert any amount of your IRA, 401k, 403b, 457, TSP plan, whatever tax-deferred plan you might have. You can convert any amount at any age from your currently tax-deferred account to these tax-free accounts. Yes, you have to pay the tax, basically paying the toll on the way out to the new account, but you're going to have to pay those taxes someday anyway. If you can spread those distributions out, say starting at 60 or 65, and you don't wait for that balloon to get this big by the time you're 73 or 75, it's going to ease the burden. It allows you to spread those distributions out. And by the way, we're in much lower tax bracket right now than we potentially could be in the future. You know, the tax bill did just pass, and people say, oh, it's permanent. It's not permanent. It's permanent until the next administration gets in and they decide maybe they want to change the rules. So if we have, you know, $37 trillion in debt, my guess is that at some point taxes are going to have to go up in the future. You might be able to get taxes out to today's known tax rates as opposed to tomorrow's, which who knows what they'll be. And if you can spread those distributions out over the period of time between now and when you actually have to start taking the money out, that's a great way to reduce those taxes. Now, we have people who have watched the show, they do the Boston tax test, and they see that they can save $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 in lifetime taxes by doing these Roth conversions. And that's not even including the amount of money that their children will save when they inherit those accounts. You leave a big tax-infested IRA to your beneficiaries, they might be in their peak earning years, and now you're going to have them have to take required minimum distributions. And now, under the new rules, they have to have all that money out within 10 years. So that could be a tremendous tax burden on your beneficiaries as well. So not only can you save yourself a tremendous amount of taxes, you'll really be doing a huge favor for your beneficiaries as well.
Couple of things that you can do right now if you're watching the program. I know most of us have our phones while we're watching television. You can go to this BostonTaxTest.com, find out right now exactly how much you owe in taxes on all of your tax-deferred savings. It's a few inputs. It's private. It's to you. That report is going to go directly to your email address. From there, you can call the phone number, sit down, have a conversation with Rob Guy here, financial advisor. This is the Retirement Revolution, but he's the founder of Tax and Investment Advisors. He'll pull together the entire picture for you. You know what? We're right here in Boston. We all know that we want to be tax efficient. Don't do it alone. Call that phone number right now, 855-255-1128. We'll be right back after this.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to the Retirement Revolution with Rob Guy. He's the founder of Tax and Investment Advisors right here in Boston. As I look down at your amazing book, Retire Free, does that mean I get to retire for free? No, we've all had to save our entire lives, but you've got 5 steps towards living your best retirement. I'm going to imagine that having a tax strategy is one of the steps. What are some of those other steps?
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing up the book. I'm very proud of the book, and it really does highlight the 5 steps of my retirement freedom roadmap. You know, freedom is a big thing for me. We should all be living a retirement with freedom, not fear. And one of the ways that you can actually live a retirement free of fear is to have a comprehensive tax-based strategy that's going to allow you to address the 5 most critical areas of your retirement life. Those areas are, first of all, your income plan. We want to start with the income plan because what's everybody's number one fear? Running out of money, right? So first we want to make sure we're not going to run out of money. We do a very comprehensive analysis that shows you what your cash flow is going to be throughout your lifetime, factoring in inflation, taxes, different market conditions. You know, we do these lifeboat drills, we call them. People do these analysis online, but they don't understand sometimes the components that go into that or the assumptions. We want to look at different inflation rates. We want to look at different market conditions and make sure that no matter what happens to the economy or interest rates or decisions made in Washington, D.C., you're never going to run out of money. So we start with the income plan. Then we have the investment strategy. You know, we feel people should be free from Wall Street speculation and fees with their money in retirement. And maybe the investment strategy that got you to retirement isn't going to be the one that's going to get you through. So we want to make sure you're not taking too much risk with your money, you're not paying too many fees, and that it's aligned with your goals. Then we want to look at the tax strategy. Of course, the tax strategy is our discussion today. Yeah. That's the one that gets me really excited because, yes, I can make a difference in someone's life by adjusting their portfolio and all that, but rarely do I get to say this is tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars I'm going to be able to put in your pocket, and that's what the tax strategy does. And then we want to make sure you're not going to lose everything to uncovered medical expenses. You know, Medicare does cover a lot of things, but it doesn't cover everything. People aren't aware that Medicare is not going to cover some of the long-term care expenses that can have in retirement. You don't want to end up in Medicaid bankruptcy, you know, because of an illness that came along. And then we want to create a loving legacy for our family. We want to have an estate plan. We have people who have second marriages or they've lost a spouse or whatever it might be. It can get complicated. It's not just about who you're going to leave your money to, but so much more than that, just to give yourself and everybody else some peace of mind. Let me give you a kind of an example of what that might look like, walking somebody through the 5 steps of the Retirement Freedom Roadmap. Not uncommon for a couple to come to me, and let's say it's a retired engineer and a retired nurse. And they've worked their whole life, they've built a nice nest egg, they believe they have enough money to live on. Oftentimes they say to me, pretty sure I'm all set with enough money to live on, but I just want to make sure I don't overpay in taxes, I'm not making any mistakes, nothing's falling through the cracks, that type of thing. You know, oftentimes the engineers will bring in their spreadsheets and all that, and that's great, right? But what we like to do is analyze that just from a little bit deeper perspective, with the understanding that any decision you make on your income plan, your investment plan, your tax plan, it's going to affect all the other parts of your plan. So let's say this couple comes in, they think they're doing okay, but they want to know that are they really going to be okay?
Is it going to run out or not?
They're going to run out, or they're going to overpay in taxes. So we run them through the 5-step process where we do that income strategy, where we're looking at all the different scenarios of rates of return. You know, people a lot of times in their financial plan, they'll put in, I assume I'm going to earn 6, 8, 10% a year for the rest of my life. Maybe, maybe not. You know, in the decade of 2000 and 2010, the total return of the S&P 500 was 0. So I don't know how many people are putting that into their analysis, but that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that, so after we've done that income analysis, we make sure they're not going to run out of money after doing all the different lifeboat drills, different scenarios. We look at their investment portfolio. They'll upload their Fidelity statements or their Merrill Lynch or Schwab statements or Edward Jones, whatever it might be. We can analyze it. One of the things I've found is that a lot of the advice that people are getting out there is really geared towards accumulation. And I'm running into people when I say, how much risk are you comfortable taking? They say, well, we don't really want to take that much risk. But then we look at their portfolio and it's actually loaded with risk and fees. Then we do that tax test that you were talking about. We have more sophisticated versions of that we can get into The Boston tax test really gives you a snapshot of what it might look like, but we can get much more comprehensive than that when people come in. And we're going to look at, should they be doing Roth conversions, qualified charitable distributions? Do they have their money sitting in the right accounts based on their situation? We take a look at, are you going to lose everything to a long-term care illness? Can you self-insure? Should you set up trusts? Does long-term care insurance make sense? Everybody's situation is a little different. We want to make sure you have the right answer for you. And then we put together an estate plan to wrap it all up. You know, a lot of people, when we run the plans out, they're actually going to have a lot more money at the end of their life than they do when they come into the office. So not only are they not going to run out of money, they might have 2 or 3 times more if they live till 95 just because of compounding. And what's going to happen with all that money? Are the kids going to get really hurt with taxes? Are you going to unintentionally disinherit someone from a first marriage? All these different things that can come up. We want to take a look at it from a very comprehensive point of view. Really, your best shot at having the most success in retirement is to make sure you cover all 5 of those areas and that you remove the major risks from your financial plan.
Wow. I'll say this, that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Now, we've got about a minute left in the show. I can't imagine that I know that you'll talk about a lot of these things in the first meeting.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's probably also then putting together these reports and coming back for a second meeting as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the first meeting, you leave your checkbook at home. It's really just a conversation between you and I to figure out who you are, what your goals are, what your values are, what you're trying to accomplish in your lifetime, what you'd like to have happen with everything you've been able to accumulate throughout your life. I take that information and then I do my analysis for you. I put it through my process, and then we have an additional follow-up meeting where I write for you my prescriptions, if you will. You coming in telling me what's ailing you, and then I'll give you my prescriptions, I'll show you the solutions, and then at that point, if you want to talk about engaging us to work with us, we're happy to do that, but there's no cost, there's no obligation for the initial meeting and for the follow-up meeting where we can show you what you might be able to do to benefit your situation.
Call that phone number right now. You can get started on your own retirement freedom roadmap. When you do, as soon as you call that phone number, you schedule that appointment, we're going to send you a complimentary copy of his book, Retire Free. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week.